Welcome to QX Church. I'm Pastor Scott Conway, and today we have an interesting topic. Submission as a gift to the submitted. Very often we think of submission as a service to the leader, not as a gift to the submitted. Now, I'm not saying submission is not a service to the leader. What I am saying is it should also be a gift to the submitted. Here's an interesting thing about this particular message. The very first time I preached this message / taught this message actually wasn't at church. It wasn't at church. It wasn't at Sunday school. It wasn't in a Bible study. It was at a business seminar. I was at a business seminar citing scripture, talking about Jesus, sharing this idea. And I was told by the host, who admittedly just had to trust me, that I had told her, I've got an idea, it's coming together, let me run with it, it'll be good. And in the first 10 minutes, I'm sharing today's message. I'm sharing today's message in much more compressed detail, but in enough that I was told I had captured half of the room with this part of the message. The idea that submission is not merely a service to the leader, but submission is a gift to the submitted when leadership is done well. Ephesians 5:22. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. When most people think about submission in Christian circles, most people think about submission even just in popular culture, the place this word seems to come up the most often seems to be in this idea. They may not know the address of this particular verse or its related verses, but they get the idea that submission comes from wives submit to your husbands. And they have this idea in their head, so that just means the man's the boss and he gets to do what he wants and he gets to say what he wants, and darn it, she better just go along. Because they are not a team, she is on his team. It's his team. And he gets to call the shots. And she just better be on board. It's not their team, it's his team. And she's on his team. And that's the idea of wives submit to your husbands that I keep running into in pop culture. That is part of the idea of submission that I often see railed against. And as we've talked about in other messages on the topic of submission, there's lots of places where there is submission in the Word of God. All of us are to be submitted one to another. Well, we can't all be each other's boss. We can't all just be members of somebody else's team. I can't be a member of everybody's team. We can team up. We can be allies, but you can't be the boss of me. Because if everybody's the boss of me and I'm the boss of everyone, how is that going to work? So there has to be some kind of a voluntary cooperation here. There's lots of talk in the Bible of being submitted to your masters. Submitted to the people where you are in an authority hierarchy. They're your boss. They're your leader in some meaningful way. Be submitted to the authorities. Be submitted to the governmental authorities. And of course, to be submitted to God. To be submitted to Christ. Now, there's a military meaning of the word submission, and that's basically what we still think of today, of you just obey orders, and that's just the way that goes. But the civilian use of it was voluntary servitude. Basically, I come on board by choice. I decide to cooperate with you because I choose to. That I come alongside. And I partner with you, perhaps because I believe in what you're doing. Perhaps as simple a thing as you've offered a certain amount of pay, and I'm willing to do a certain amount of work for that certain amount of pay. that is voluntary, not compulsory. It's circumstantial, not positional. And if I don't like it, I can leave. So this idea of submission as a gift to the submitted builds out of this. And when we think about Ephesians 5:22, let's complete the verse. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. As to the Lord. In some way, shape, or form, the Lord is involved in this. Now, what I've heard actually taught from the pulpit in my younger years is that means that a wife is to submit to her husband in the same manner as which she would submit to God. Basically, to treat her husband as though he is God of the family, God of the household. That's not quite what the pastors think they're saying, but it's kind of what they're saying. Well, not long after that, we have this other verse, Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives. And I've heard said often, it's like, well, if the husbands would love their wives, wives could submit to their husbands. It's easier to submit to a loving authority. It's easier to submit to an authority who really wants the best for you. It's easier to submit to an authority who really wants to be the best leader for you. And it's easier to submit to an authority who truly seeks your transcendent joy. So when you have a husband who comes from a grounded place of love, a grounded place of honor, a grounded place of cherishing, most women I know say that, well, I could submit to that. If my husband would come from a place where I know he's coming from a place of love, if my husband would honor me, if my husband would cherish me as a treasure, if I knew there was going to be quality having and intimate holding, and that while we would be together through better or worse, he always seeks to be the better in the middle of the worst, never allows himself to be the worse, and richer or poorer, that he always does seek to enrich our family. He's never the one responsible for impoverishing us, whether materially or spiritually. And that he does truly seek to be a healthy leader, psychologically healthy, to physically take care of himself so that he can do all of his things, given the parameters of whatever his life circumstances are. That he really does keep me in my proper place as his life giver, as his partner, as his wife. And that he doesn't raise other people above me, that I know I'm his number one. And that we created our way. That's not his way or the highway. It's our way. What is his way? He seeks out what is my way. And we together collaborate to make an our way. First off, I could commit to that deal for as long as we both shall live. But secondly, I can submit to that. And basically all that boils down to is be faithful to your vows. Because faithfulness to the vows means you're loving. Faithfulness to your vows means you're honoring. Faithfulness to your vows means you're cherishing. Those are the vows. The vows aren't, don't get divorced, don't fool around with other people. When I do a wedding, that's not the vows. And that if you are being unfaithful, but you still want your partner to be faithful, well, that's kind of a little unfair. That I have a right to be unloving, but you don't. I have a right to be dishonoring, but you don't. I have a right to not cherish you, but you don't have a right to not cherish me. That I expect to have all the having, but I'm not going to give you the kind of quality having that pleases you. I expect to only have to do the holding I want to do, or only do the holding on the way to the having, and so on and so forth. But I expect you to keep your vows. I'm just not necessarily going to keep mine. And I'll be really mad if you're not keeping yours. But I expect grace when I'm not keeping mine. Well, that doesn't sound right, does it? That doesn't sound like husbands love your wives. And let's look at the rest of that verse. Ephesians 5:25, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. And just in case the Ephesians didn't get it from that part, verse 25 finishes with, and gave himself for it. As Christ loved the church, amplified with, and gave himself for it. Now we know Christ literally died on the cross for us. So he literally laid down his life for the existence of the church. A part that we often don't think about is the whole incarnation was about that. It says, greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. The greater agape, greater proof of character. Because that's what agape is. It's a character of love. Greater proof of character has no man than this, that he laid down his life, and we'll come back to that word, for his friends, those whom he phileos. But to lay down his life, part of that means physical life, but the word there, I believe is suke, is to lay down one's soul. Part of it means physical life, in a very literal way, being willing to physically die for your family. And in a day and an age where for hundreds, thousands of years, that was a very real need families needed. They needed someone who would stand between the family and danger and risk and even lay down their lives to protect their families. And that was the reality of male life for millennia. But this other part of what that exact word means, to lay down your soul for those you phileo. Well, we have a clean definition of soul here, and that's will over mind over emotions. And so if you're going to lay down your soul, you're going to make your choices in light of your wife, in light of your kids. You won't just make the choices as a man, you'll make the choices as a husband and a man. You won't even just make your choices as a husband and a man, you will make your choices as a father, a husband, and a man. And as you take your wife into account, and you take your kids into account, and you think that way, you are laying down your mind to your wife and your kids. To think in terms of your wife and your kids. To think in terms of partnership. To think in terms of familyship. And that you lay down your emotions to your wife and your kids. That your rule sets shift because you are in partnership and leadership. So that changes your anger. What you're willing to do and the things you are prepared to do shift, which is relevant to fear. The things that are going to hurt you shift, which is relevant to hurt. Because something hurts your wife, something hurts your kids, it hurts you too, if you have laid down your emotions to your family. Hopelessness. Exactly what I'm doing, exactly the way I'm doing, it will never produce the results I desire. The results you're after shift if you've laid down your suke to your family. Guilt shifts. What you're trying to accomplish shifts, which is relevant to frustration. What you're trying to make sense of shifts, which is relevant to confusion. What it is you're trying to be as a man shifts, which is relevant to your feeling of adequacy. What brings you joy shifts, which is relevant to the emotion of happiness. What it is you're trying to accomplish and what's important to you shifts, which is relevant to confidence. And again and again and again, there are examples as if you lay down your suke, you lay down that element of your life to the role of husband, that office that you voluntarily assumed when you chose to marry. When you lay that down to the role of father, which is a role that you are volunteering for when you have sex. Because I don't know if anybody knows this, but that's how you make babies. And even if you're using contraception, that's still how you make babies. And so these are voluntary roles in which we engage and that we lay down our lives for that. But as Christ loved the church, as to the Lord, there seems to be a theme developing here. That once more, Jesus seems part of the equation. So let's look at something Jesus had to say about coming to him and submitting to him that is relevant to all of this that we're talking about. Matthew chapter 11. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, first book of the New Testament, chapter 11, verse 28. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will tell you what to do and burden you with all these requirements and tell you not to think or have any opinions because I'm going to tell you what your opinion is. Nope, that's not what it says. Matthew 11:28 says, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. I will give you rest. If you are weary, I will give you rest. If you are exhausted, I will give you rest. If you are carrying this heavy burden, if it is just hard, I will give you rest. And this passage continues, verse 28 to 30. Jesus tells us, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Take my yoke upon you, Jesus' yoke, and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Let's take a look at some of this. So the job of the leader. Now here's a funny thing. Yes, I'm at a business seminar. Yes, it's business. It's not Christian business, it's just business. And I'm citing these scriptures at a business seminar. And the audience is captivated. At a business seminar? So in church, talking about our Lord, Jesus Christ, and his leadership, we should be doubly captivated. The job of the leader. Well, Jesus says, I will give you rest. Well, that would tell us then the job of the leader includes give rest. My leadership as a man, my leadership as a husband, my leadership as a father should at least in part give rest to the submitted. It should let others have an opportunity to set down their emotional load. It should at least give others the opportunity to set down their mental load. Now, does this mean that being submitted to me is always going to be easy? Maybe. We're going to get to that. Does it mean there's never going to be hard stuff to do? Of course there's going to be hard stuff to do sometimes. But it's not my leadership that is what's making it hard. It's just hard. And that my leadership helps you through it. That the presence of my leadership versus the absence of my leadership should be a difference between the levels of rest you get. Me being in your life, to use my own vernacular, should be a plus, not a minus. The job of the leader, give rest. The job of the leader, teach, train, explain. Jesus says, learn from me. So my leadership should provide insight and understanding. Now this is part of leadership being easier. If I'm just constantly just telling you what to do and you're always waiting for me to give my next instruction, or worse, you're waiting for me to get mad about the next thing, and I'm not explaining what it is I want, you just have to be reactive. Well, that's kind of tough, because you never really know exactly what's expected of you. Or if there's skill sets that you need in order to do the things that I ask, that I train you, I provide training for you. I teach you things. Now, this depends upon your particular role. So when I'm explaining things to you, here's one of the keys. It has to be the real explanation. I'm not just making up some explanation right now because it makes me look good and sounds good. It has to be, all principles must be consistently applied. If I'm training you in something, and this is particularly applicable in job-related leadership, that I make sure you have the skill sets to do the job I'm asking you to do. I'm not going to hire you for a job and just say, all right, have at it, and go, well, what exactly am I doing? Well, you'll know when I get mad at you. And so we provide training. Now, in particular, when it comes to like husband, wife, and father leadership, it also means I can't expect someone to do something that they haven't learned how to do. I can't expect my kids to fix their bed if they haven't been properly trained in how to fix a bed. I can't get upset at someone for doing something if they don't know what to do. I can't just assign a task to someone if they don't know how to do that task, any more than I can accept an assignment for a task if I have no idea how to do the task. And so the teaching, the training, the explaining, that's part of the kind of leadership that is a gift to the submitted, that makes it easier for them to do the things that need doing. As simple a thing as I was just talking to somebody yesterday, that when I was younger, we could always tell if my mother or I unloaded the dishwasher, or if my father or my brother unloaded the dishwasher. Because my mother and I knew where everything went. And as often as we try to teach and train and explain where everything goes, my father and my brother really only knew where the things went that they always went to go get all the time. And so they knew where the silverware went, they knew where the plates went, they knew where the bowls went, they knew where the cups went. And that was it. They didn't know where the pots went, they didn't know where the pans went, they didn't know where any of the storage things went. And so the philosophy that my mother and I exercised when we were putting stuff away is, everything goes where it belongs. The philosophy that my father and my brother would exercise when they put things away is, everything goes where it fits. And so when my mother or I would go looking for something and it wasn't where it belonged, but we knew the dishwasher had been emptied, we thought, okay, that was either my father or my brother being helpful. And the next thing we understood that their philosophy is, it goes where it fits. That means that they would open cabinets, they would open drawers, and if there was room, that's where the thing got put. So we had a pattern that we could use to look for wherever things would end up. And so as part of the kitchen leadership, the laws of the dishes, we just learned to expect that as much as we try to teach, train, and explain, that it just wasn't going to go where it needed to go. Because they didn't do it often enough to know where these things went. They didn't cook often enough to know where those things went. And so the teaching, training, and explaining also includes some measure of acceptance of the fact that sometimes some people just don't get some things. And that we were appreciative of the act of the help. Because they were helpful. They were helping. And we're not going to punish them for being helpful because we want them to keep being helpful. Now, if we can get them to be helpful and everything actually gets where we wish it would go, that might be better. But we'll take the help. put in a place where it fits is better than them not being willing to help at all because they just get in trouble for helping. So my leadership should provide insight and understanding. My leadership should help people close the gap in their knowledge. My leadership should be gentle. My leadership should be humble. Gentle and humble. Why? Because Jesus specifically said in this passage, I am gentle and humble. So my leadership should be gentle. Here's a metaphor. Leading on the dance floor. If you ever watch a couple dance, the man is supposed to be the leader on the dance floor. But does he just grab her, yank her close, and drag her anywhere on the floor? He's just in the mood to go? Or is it kind of a gentle cue to indicate direction? It's a gentle cue. And even if he's holding her tight and they're just gently swaying, she should be able to relax into the dance and not have to make those decisions, not have to be constantly looking. Now that's his job. Her job's hard enough. If you ever watch good quality ballroom dancing and look at usually what the men are doing and usually what the women are doing, and you tell me which one of them seems to have the most to do. And so the decision making of looking out for directions, looking out for obstacles, looking out for other couples, looking out for the end of the dance floor, looking out for like little kids at the wedding reception running across the dance, that's his job. He's supposed to do that so that he can lead and she can just relax into the dance and be his partner. That's gentle leadership. And my leadership should be humble. I should know my proper place. If I am the husband, that partnership is my proper place. If I'm the father, that parental position, partnered with the mother, is my proper place. If I'm leading as an employer, if I'm leading as a sensei, I have a proper place. And I need to know the truth about myself. That is my strengths and my weaknesses. And I need to play to my strengths, and I need to compensate for my weaknesses. And I should not overstep my bounds. And by the way, one big common way we overstep our bounds, even in parental leadership, is telling a kid what his opinion has to be. When kids are not allowed to have feelings, they are not allowed to have opinions, they stop talking to you. Now, they're kids. They may have some childish opinions. They may have some childish desires, because that's where the word childish comes from. If they're older, they may have some rather immature opinions and immature desires. Why? Because they're not yet mature. And even us might not be as sophisticated at things as we might wish we were. And so part of not overstepping my bounds means that I at least always need to value your individuality. So even as a husband, even as a father, to be aware of, am I stepping into a territory that I ought not be stepping into? Am I making demands I ought not be making? Am I giving orders that ought not be given? Easy and simple. Jesus says, my yoke is easy. My leadership should be easy to follow, which means it does not place great demands on the submitted. And my leadership should be simple, meaning it should not be that complicated with lots of steps that make submission too challenging. This idea of my yoke is easy, that actually comes from a term of yoking two oxen together. There's the bigger senior oxen, and then there's usually the smaller, younger junior oxen. And you yoke the stronger with the weaker, the bigger with the smaller, the older with the younger, so that all the younger one has to do is just go along. And the bigger one is usually the one who's bearing the heaviest load. Now, the junior one is making a difference. It's not like they're just being dragged along. But they don't have to do the heavy work. And it's simple in that all they have to do is copy, copy, copy. It's like a mentorship relationship. I just follow you. I just go where you're going. I understand the instructions being given by the cart driver, and I do whatever you do in response to the instructions, and that's how the junior learns the instructions, is through copy, copy, copy. What we call modeling. So my yoke is easy, my yoke is simple, is because all I have to do is follow the leader. Which we call sensei leadership. Sensei leadership is you walk the path and show others the way, which means you have to walk the path first. So you be the example, explain the example you're being. And my leadership should burden lightly. So my yoke is easy, my burden is light. My leadership should not be a heavy burden. In fact, on balance, my leadership should even lighten someone's burden. That the presence of my leadership versus the absence of my leadership should make your life easier. It should lighten your burden. It should simplify your life rather than complicate your life. It should bring ease to your life rather than overburden your life. At the very least, it should lighten your mental burden. It should lighten your emotional burden. It should make it not quite so hard to do these things. So in all of this, then, the ideal job of the submitted is just submit to good leadership. If leadership is good, the job of the submitted is to simply go along. So if, think about it as a job. If I have a job and I've got good leadership at the job, I just have to go along with the leadership. Because they're doing a good job leading, I just go along. Same thing as a husband. If my wife is to submit to me, I need good leadership that she can consistently submit to. And when I'm doing that, all she has to do is go along. With my kids, if I've got good leadership of my kids, all they need to do is just go along with the leadership. Because it's good quality leadership. Submitting one to another, peer to peer. If we're leading well, all we have to do is just get in line with the good leadership. And lay down mental load. Submission to good leadership should be an opportunity to surrender the mental load to a leader who is accepting that burden. Now there's exceptions, of course, because if the leader doesn't know how to assume the mental burden very well, you might have to be second-guessing the leader. But what the mental burden is, it's the one who's constantly having to think of things. Who's constantly having to be the one to troubleshoot. Who's constantly having to figure out the one of how do we do all of this with the resources we have. That's part of the mental burden. And if the submitted can be trusting the evaluation and the decisions of the leadership, then the submitted don't have to worry about all of that. Because they know the leadership's got that on lock. And lay down the emotional load. Submission to good leadership should be an opportunity to surrender the emotional load to a leader who's accepting that burden, and also, yes, with exceptions. Because both of these assume that the leader is good at these things. The first off, they're willingly assuming the mental and emotional load, but also that they're doing something that they have some capability to do and do well. So here's a simple example of emotional load in a fairly unemotional situation. My first time driving in snow and ice, I was actually driving from Kingman, Arizona to Las Vegas, Nevada. And it snowed while we were in Kingman, just before we had to leave. It started to snow on the way to Kingman, but the roads were covered in snow by the time we were leaving. And as we got to the Nevada border, we stopped in at Hoover Dam, and it wasn't snowing that much there. But then we were told that, the snow is on its way to Las Vegas. And the Nevada Highway Patrol is thinking of closing the highway. So if we want to make sure we get home, we better get moving. Well, my lady just trusted my driving. She assumed that I knew what I was doing, that I had the mental load. She assumed that if there were any concerns to be had, I was handling them, that I was assuming the emotional load, that she didn't have to figure it out, she didn't have to worry about it. She could just submit to my driving and let me drive us to Las Vegas. And I got us to Las Vegas just fine, got us to our condo just fine. And after we got there, then she asked, like, have you ever actually driven in snow and ice before? And I told her, well, no, I hadn't. It's like, oh. I was afraid that might have been the case. That's why I didn't ask earlier, because all I would have done was worry. So the fact that she didn't even ask because she didn't want to worry is her surrendering the emotional load to me. I'm not going to worry about it. Scott's got it. Scott is assuming the responsibility to get us safely to the condo. I am just going to trust him and submit to his leadership on his driving. And if there's anything to worry about, he'll worry about it for me. I don't have to worry about it. If there's anything to figure out, he'll figure it out. And if he has any trouble figuring out, he'll ask me questions for my help. And I knew that she would worry, because that would be a very reasonable thing to do if you're on a road with a driver that has never done this before. And she just trusted that I have a long history of responsible performance of responsibilities I assume. So she could lay down the mental load, she could lay down the emotional load. Emotionally, it's for the relationship. Laying down the emotional load means that she knows I am taking lead in this relationship. That she knows she's married to a man who is seeking to build the love, seeking to build the honor, seeking to build the cherishing, seeking the quality having, seeking the intimate holding. That I'm quite intentionally building these things because that's what leaders do. They build the things that are the thing. Which swings us around to the main job of the submitted. The main job of the submitted goes back to the ideal job of the submitted. So much as submission, being a gift of the submitted, depends upon being able to submit to good leadership. If there is good leadership, that is a gift to the submitted. Good leadership lets the submitted release the mental load to good leadership. Release the emotional load to good leadership. It implies good leadership, good leadership, good leadership. Implies the possibility of the converse, bad leadership. Because in order to be submitted to good leadership, you have to know it's good leadership. Well, that means there must be this thing that's not good leadership, and quite likely this thing that's bad leadership. So it means in part then the job of the submitted is to evaluate whether there is good enough leadership to submit and release. If leadership is failing in a meaningful enough way, the submitted have a main job: responding wisely to bad leadership. And so if the leadership is bad, the main job of the submitted involves any number of these things. And we'll swing back through them. Delay, disobey, belay, countermand, partial removal, temporary removal, permanent removal. So delay is when leadership is giving an instruction, leadership is asking for a submission that maybe ought not be done, probably ought not be done right now, and that you really kind of think that if the leadership just has a couple of minutes to think about this, they'll figure that out for themselves. that I don't need to disobey them, but I just need to give them enough space to think about it. And that if they just have a little while to settle down a bit, if I just delay obedience to those commands for just a little bit, they'll figure it out. That just now is not the right time. Or it could be a simpler thing as, well, I'm in the middle of doing other responsible things and I'm not going to be irresponsible to obey an instruction immediately. And so obedience will have to be delayed. There may be, hopefully, as between a leader and the submitted, an agreement as to the terms upon which obedience is immediate and the terms upon which obedience may be delayed, which, at the very least ought to include responsibilities. So that you don't make your wife what we call your beck and call girl, where she's just at your beck and call. You call and she's expected to be there in 10 seconds or less, or 60 seconds or less. That she's not the Minuteman. That she has her own job to do. And that if she's constantly on alert, she's constantly on standby and trying to do her responsibilities, that can be kind of tough on anybody. So just imagine you have a job and you're working for an employer and you have this full-time set of obligations, that's your job you're hired to do, and you are in constant call to the boss. Every time they call you, you have to go instantly, and you will get reprimanded if you don't finish that 40-hour workload that you already had that was already your responsibility. If that's part of your job, that only works if the leader rarely interrupts your work to call on you. So it's the same thing as between husband and wife, and especially when you have kids. So sometimes you have to respond to leadership with a delay. Sometimes the challenge with a request or the challenge with an instruction or the challenge with an order isn't what it is, it's the timing. Just not right now. That if there's like a 5-minute window, a 10-minute window, a 1-hour window, a 1-day window, whatever it might be, depending upon the kind of things you're talking about, that delay would be a way to deal with instructions that are untimely, maybe good instructions, but untimely, maybe a perfectly reasonable request, just untimely, or a probably or maybe bad request that the leader themselves will sort out in minutes or an hour or so. In the face of bad leadership, the submitted may also have to just flat out disobey. Just flat out say, nope, not doing that. I will not be a participant in that. Now, sometimes leaders, whether it's bosses, husbands, whatever, basically wanted a my way or the highway sort of thing. And sometimes the submitted have to just say, no, I'm not doing that. That won't cost you, that will cost me. Or that won't just cost you, that will cost us. And I'm not going to be a participant in doing damage to us. Now, if you're going to go do it on your own, I'm not the boss of you. But I'm not doing that. And that could be this flat-out disobedience where someone says, no, I think that is a bad instruction. I think that is a really bad idea. And while I think maybe you probably shouldn't do it either, I am definitely not going to be a participant in that. Then there's the belay a command. To belay a command is to not only refuse to obey yourself, but to tell other people not to obey. Now, this would most likely happen in more of a family dynamic where someone's telling the kids to do something, and the other parent steps in and says, don't do that. That's to belay a command. So whether it's mom or dad saying, that's it, this is what you're going to do, and the other person says, no, don't do that. No. That's belaying a command. And then countermand is when you give a different command in place of the command. So if someone says, okay, get in the car, we're leaving, and the other parent says, no, don't get in the car. Okay, that's belaying. But if they say, no, don't get in the car, you go to your room and you're staying here. Okay, now that's a countermand. And now when both people are convinced that they're both being good leaders for the kids, this gets to be a problem. That usually results in a fight. But to countermand means that you give an instruction different than the instruction given. And so if I'm in a position of submission, say at work, and the boss tells us to do something, and I go, okay, that is not right. I might disobey. I might tell the rest of the team, no, we should not do that. That would be belaying. Or I might even give the team a different instruction. Now, I might not be in the position of authority to have the right to give that instruction, but I might have the moral authority to give that instruction. And so that's delay, disobey, belay, and countermand. Then you have the removal levels. In the face of bad leadership, the submitted may have to partially remove a leader. Now, what partial removement means is that they just don't get a say in this area anymore. They don't know what they're talking about, and we are not going to listen to them in that area anymore. That they don't understand and they refuse to understand. They just want what they want in this area, and they don't know what's going on. Now, my parents did a lot of this in what they call domains, where they might have disagreements and occasionally maybe even an argument about what should happen at work. But that was my father's domain, and my mother would say, frankly, you're the one who's there. You own the business, you operate the business. It might be community property in that we're both owners, but I don't know what's going on there. I don't work with these people every single day you do. And ultimately, you are responsible for your business. I'm not. So, I will defer to you. But then likewise, home was my mother's domain. Now, my father might have things he would like to see his sons do. My father might have opinions about what's going on in the household, but he's not the one who's there. My mother was the one who was there, so that was her domain. And so, when they disagreed about the parenting issues, when they disagreed about a home issue, my mom got her way, because that was her domain. But what if my father showed up and basically said, well, I'm the man of the house, you're going to do what I say, woman? Well, then, my mother would partially remove my father from leadership in family matters of the house that he doesn't know enough about. And that would be a partial removal. Now, she never had to do that because my father had enough wisdom to understand that the person who's there all the time is the one who should make those decisions. So that's how they set that up. Then there's temporary removal. So temporary removal is total removal, but for a period of time. Now, it's possible the temporary removal could be pending whether it's permanent or not. And so in a marriage situation, you could think of it in terms of, okay, that's it, we are maybe done. We're going to get separated, maybe divorced, maybe not divorced, that decision hasn't been made yet. So that would be a temporary removal. So temporary removal pending, looking at whether or not there might be reconciliation or divorce, and we don't know yet. So that would be a temporary removal pending the permanent decision. But temporary removal could be as simple a thing as, okay, you don't get to exercise leadership right now for this reason. It could be as simple a thing as you're not here. You're stationed in the Mideast for 14 months, and of course, I'm going to run things while you're gone because you're gone. And so there's a temporary removal of the leadership. And you may have opinions, and you may share them with emails and video chat and whatever, but ultimately, I have to make the call. I'm the one that's here. Temporary removal might be that someone's just going through a bad time, and they are not in the good emotional state to be making competent decisions. That they're too stressed out. They're not handling something well. And for a season, they can't be asked to exhibit certain leadership. And then, of course, permanent removal that just says, nope, I can't follow your lead. And someone's permanently removed from leadership. Now, that doesn't mean a divorce in a marriage situation. That just means, no, you're not going to be the boss around here. You do you, I'll do me, and maybe we'll still stay married, but you do you and I'll do me, and we'll be roommates. So if the main job of the leader, or the ideal job of the leader, it includes give rest, teach, train, explain, be gentle, be humble, be easy, be simple, and burden lightly, so that the submitted can do the ideal job of the submitted, submit to good leadership, lay down the mental load, and lay down the emotional load. then if in the face of bad leadership, the main job of the submitted after making that evaluation is to determine if delay, disobey, belay, countermand, partial removal, temporary removal, or permanent removal is in order. That then means the main job of the leader is to never make the submitted have to do their main job. That means never give instructions that need to be delayed, disobeyed, belayed, or countermanded. It means never give leadership that needs partial removal, temporary removal, or permanent removal. And some of these things are easy to do if you're doing Golden Rule 101. Just think about it in the reverse direction. Is this the way I would like to be led? Are these the rules to me, or are these just the rules from me? And the beauty of living life is that we're often in both roles. There are places where we are the ones who are submitting to authority in some way, shape, or form. How do we want to be led? Very few of us are an island, where no man is an island. But we all have authority in our life to which we ought to be voluntarily submitting in some way, shape, or form. How do we want to be submitted to? But how do we want to be led? And if we don't have that, besides that being potentially problematic, if we had to submit to authority, how would we like authority to lead us? Golden Rule 101. So the main job of the leader is never make the submitted have to do their main job of delay, disobey, belay, countermand, partial, temporary, permanent removal. And so if we make sure we are never leading in a way that would require any of those things as the wise response to us, then we are allowing the submitted to do their ideal job of just go along with good leadership because we're providing good leadership. To lay down the mental load because the leader is assuming the mental load and doing a good job with it. That we can lay down the emotional load because we know that the leader is bearing that emotional load and doing a good job with it. And if they weren't doing a good job with it, they would let us know where they need help. So the main job of the leader of never making the submitted have to do their job includes, among other things, the 4 rules: copper, silver, gold, and platinum. So the copper rule of the leader is think through it. So imagine if you know I'm impulsive and that sometimes I make big decisions, overcommitted, overstated, without really thinking it through. How well would you trust my decisions? Could you submit to my decisions if you know I have a history of often not thinking through my decisions? And if you might have half a dozen very reasonable, important, wise questions to ask, I have no idea. I haven't really thought it through. I'll make up some answers that sound lofty, maybe sound spiritual, maybe sound principled, but really I'm winging it because I want to. I have this idea, it pops in my head, I get enthusiastic, and I start to make long-term commitments on some short-term enthusiasm without really thinking through what all is involved in this thing. And especially the more it affects my family, the bigger a deal it is. Like if I hear about this thing that means, this is this awesome opportunity. We need to move to Anchorage, Alaska. So let's pack everything up and let's go. We're moving this weekend. So whoa, what are we doing? It's going to be awesome. Just trust me. Like, well, if you don't trust, I really think through things, you shouldn't make such a big change just by trusting me. And so part of the obligation of good leaders is to think through things, think all the way through them. Look at all of the pieces, look at all the variables in play. Have a big picture in mind. Because in order to be assertive, that means you're moving forward on purpose with respect for others. Fundamental to good leadership. Which means you have to know, what is your forward? Have you really thought about this? What all is involved in this? And then on purpose, you're choosing this intentionally. So if you're choosing it, that's an act of will. And your will should then tell your mind, go look at this. Let's analyze this. Let's figure it out. What will it take? How much work will it be? What are the pros? What are the cons? What are the risks involved? How do you compensate for the risks? What could we win? What might we lose? To bring the emotions in line. The emotions might get all enthusiastic, but the emotions should not make the decision. If the emotions make the decision, then the emotion governs the mind. And that's when you rationalize and justify and come up with all these lofty sounding things that really aren't your principles. They really aren't your theology. But boy, does it sound good about supporting the thing you want. That you kick it up to the level of choice. And the decider, the will, the decider tells the mind, do an analysis. Because I have to make a decision that is submitted to others, submitted to principles, submitted to my faith, submitted to my God. And I can only do that if you give me the right information. So think through it. And if you trust your leader really thinks through things before they make a commitment, you can trust their commitment. If you trust your leader is really thinking through things as they're doing the thing that they're doing, you can trust what they're doing because you know that they're thinking through it. The fundamental of the Copper Rule, thinking through things, means that you can lay down the mental burden to the leader because you can trust the leader's thinking through things. When you don't trust your leaders thinking through things, that's when now you have a greater mental burden because now you have to figure out all the things connected to whatever the leader is thinking. Now you have to figure out all the variables involved in the decision the leader is deciding. And it increases your mental burden. And if you can't trust the decision making of the leader to be handling the decisions that they're claiming they're handling, then that creates an emotional burden on the submitted because now you have to not only figure it out, you have to deal with all the emotions connected to figuring it out and all the uncertainty that creates. So good leadership involves the Copper Rule. Think through it. Good leadership involves the Silver, Gold, and Platinum Rule, which are all just variations on a theme. The Golden Rule is to treat others the way you would like to be treated. So the gold here is as you would like. Silver is do no harm. Platinum as they would like. And so if you lead in a way to not do harm to those submitted to your leadership, if you lead in such a way that you're not doing to those submitted to you that you wouldn't want done to you if you're submitted to someone else, if you're doing the Platinum Rule, if you're not doing things that you know you're submitted have a particular problem with, and you're not imposing upon them in their particular problem, and you're using the Golden Rule and the Platinum Rule of you're treating people the way you would like to be treated, you're leading the way you would like to be led, and the Platinum Rule that you're leading in the way that works best for the people you're partnered with. You're doing the things that function best for the team. So you're not telling the center to go be a receiver. You're not telling the pitcher to go play first base. That you know what people are good at. You know what people aren't good at. You know what they do like. You know what they don't like. You know what game they're good at. You know what position they're good at playing. And you're not making them do something that's not them. That's part of good leadership. Then here's a big part as a leader. Be indispensable. And by the way, this is also a big part of being submitted too. Be indispensable. And being indispensable means that if you were gone from their life would be diminished. If you were gone from their life, you would be really hard to replace. Maybe even impossible. That if they wanted all of the benefit that you provide, that would be really hard to find. So being indispensable, say, as an employer, has to be more than just like, well, I pay them all this money. Okay, is there no one else who will pay them all this money? So if they quit, that just means that they just don't have income anymore. Well, I suppose they could go find another job somewhere. It's like, okay, then it's not the income that makes you indispensable. You know what makes you indispensable? Good leadership. 4P360, 360-degree quality leadership based upon the 4 rules that we just discussed, copper, silver, gold, and platinum. The 4 pillars of being powerful, being practical, being principled, and being positive, and creating this ohana culture that is oasis and harmony and assertiveness and nobility and aloha, a spirit of love and connection where the people are important, this whole people living whole lives. That's hard to replace. If someone leaves that kind of leadership, if someone leaves that kind of community, that's going to be tough to find anywhere. That makes you indispensable as an employer. And similarly speaking, being indispensable as a leader, indispensable as a husband, indispensable as a wife, means that you should be almost impossible to replace. That the perks, the benefits are going to be diminished. Because the quality, since we're talking leadership and submission being a gift, the quality of your leadership is such that if your wife left you, it would be tough to find a man who could provide for her what you provide. It would be tough to find a man who loves her the way you love her, who honors her the way you honor her, who will cherish her the way you cherish her, who will give her the kind of quality having and the intimate holding that you give her, that will make her life as better as you make her life, that will enrich her life the way you enrich her life, that will bring health to your relationship and to her and to your household the way that you do, that will create this spectacular higher third alternative that we call our way out of the my way and her way. And that will be the kind of husband that puts her in her proper place so no one else takes her spot. So her spot's not open for someone else to walk into because you made it open. And that if you are that kind of indispensable as a husband, that's good leadership. Likewise, as a wife, take all the same things and go the other direction. If your husband couldn't replace you because no one's going to love him the way you love him, no one's going to honor him the way that you honor him, no one is going to give him the quality submission that you give him, that it's going to be hard for him to find the kind of quality having and intimate holding that you provide, that he's not going to find a partner who is going to be enriching his life the way you enrich his life, adding health to his life the way you add health to his life. That's not going to make his life better the way you make his life better. That's going to be tough for him to find someone who's going to keep him in that husband number 1 slot the way that you do. It's going to be tough for him to find a partner who's going to partner with him so that there's a your way and a his way, and you make this higher third alternative our way. And be indispensable so that if ye were gone from the other person's life, their life would be tremendously diminished. Be indispensable. And a few key things. You make it better because you're there. But because you are in someone's life, you make it a net better. That your absence makes it worse. Now this is a simpler thing as when I was still living at home. I'd lived at home all through school. When I left, that increased the burden on my family. Because I would do a lot of the family laundry. Well, now they have to do all of their own laundry. I would do some of the family ironing. So now they have to do all of their own ironing. I would do some of the cleaning up and some of the picking up and some of the grocery shopping and all of these things that would alleviate burden from the family so that when I left, the burden to the family went up because I was no longer there. Because my participation in the household was such a high net gain that my absence from the household created an additional burden on the family from the things I used to do. So I was indispensable. Now, I wasn't so indispensable that there was no way for them to get along without me. I was just indispensable at the level that now they had to do some of the things for themselves that I had been doing for them. Just like when I moved out, now I had to do all my own things that they would also do for me. And so we had this interdependence that was this mutual indispensability. So when I moved out, now I got to pay all my own bills. I didn't have to pay all my own bills at the house. I only had to pay some of my bills when I was up at the house. Now I had to do all of my own grocery shopping. I didn't have to do all of my own grocery shopping when I lived with my family. I only had to do some of my own shopping, and so on and so forth. We had mutual indispensability going on in an interdependent relationship. We made it better because we were there. They made it better for me, I made it better for them, so that when we separated our households, and now I have my own home, it was harder for me. And it was harder for them. It wasn't a relief to them, it was an additional burden to them. Now they were very excited to see me have my own place, but they also recognized, okay, there's like half a dozen things that we're going to have to do all of on our own, and there's like 3 things we're going to have to learn on our own, one of which they never figured out. I still had to go to the house to program the VCR back in the day. Be a gift. As a leader, be a gift. And that's part of making it better, but making it better at such a high level that those who submit to your leadership can just relax and not be emotionally burdened by your leadership. That they don't have to always second guess everything. They can lay down the mental burden. That your leadership does not create a mental burden. And they can just go along because they know you're making good decisions. Be indispensable includes bring your uniqueness. Every single one of us is unique. Every relationship we have is unique. Every relationship I have with every human being is this unique thing. Now, I'm the same in all of them, so I'm the common denominator. But because the other person is this unique human being, the precise dynamics between me and any given person is unique. That means I have all of these unique things that are these unique relationships. So you show up with what's special, what's different, what's unique about you, your particular mix of strengths and weaknesses, your particular mix of skills and gaps. And you create this thing quite intentionally with your uniqueness combined with your partner's uniqueness. And as husband and wife, I show up with my uniqueness as a man. She shows up with her uniqueness as a woman. And we build this unique team, this unique couple, this unique dynamic, where the relationship is a higher thing than either one of us that helps elevate us, which is that 4th point. Make the relationship elevating for both of us. If we do cleave well, that means there's a my way and then your way. And from the my way and your way, we create an our way. That our way should be a higher third alternative. So if as the man I'm thinking, well, you just submit to me, woman, and so you're on my team. Then we're not creating this higher third alternative. I'm just having you help me. And I've got my thing. And you're just my assistant on my thing. You're the accessory in my life. Well, that doesn't elevate. We both elevate if we both combine to create this higher third thing that is our unique relationship. We create this higher third way, this higher third alternative. And that higher third thing elevates both of us toward that new higher third thing. So I had my thing, you had your thing. Now we have our thing, and our thing lifts both of us. So be indispensable. Make it better. Be a gift. Bring your uniqueness. Make the relationship elevating. So in particular with husband-style leadership, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. So to the extent your husband is leading in a manner similar to the Lord, loving you, giving himself for you, just go along. If he's handling the mental burden, let him handle the mental burden. Just let it go. If he's handling the emotional burden, let him handle the emotional burden. Just let it go. Because you need a place of rest. Probably some 80% of women, it might be higher, but going upon the particular women that I talk to, communicate with, coach, counsel, and whatnot, a female mind seems more predisposed to always be on. A male mind seems predisposed to be a channel thinker, and to think in terms of individual channels, and there's a channel 0, there's a channel that has nothing on it. If you think of a man's mind as a room with all these boxes, or as like, I've heard the term that men are waffles. And there's one square there, there's one box there, there's nothing in it. It's a nothing box. And the man's brain can go in this nothing box and he can just turn off. What we call vegging. But for whatever reason, the term sometimes used is that women are like spaghetti, everything touches everything. And I find that to be statistically true, not universally true, because I also see exceptions. And that means that the woman doesn't have a nothing box. She has no channel 0. And in fact, she can't think in individual channels. It's like when she's on channel 1, there's these little pip screens of channel 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All running at the same time, pulling her attention. And the only way she gets rest is if she can turn off the whole television. She has no nothing box because her room isn't boxes. It's just one big room with everything in it. And her brain doesn't turn off. The only way she gets rest from that is if she can leave the whole room and close and lock the door. Because everything touches everything. It's all connected all the time. It doesn't stop. And if in addition to that, she has to bear a mental burden because she always has to watch out for her leader and kind of figure out what he's doing and second guess what he's talking about, and that she's constantly bearing the mental burden, she's constantly bearing the emotional burden for the relationship because she's usually the one trying to keep the marriage going and figuring out what do I have to sacrifice, what do I have to put up with, what do I have to just, and she's the one always figuring that out so that she can stay married, so that she can still be the mom, and she doesn't have rest. She's going to burn out. Her brain is going to get fried because it never gets to turn off. So, to me, as a husband, that means part of my job, if she's going to submit to me, is to give her that rest. To give her those periods where the husband comes home from work and she comes home from work, assuming if we're both working, and she can walk in the door and go, I'm home. I'm safe. I can relax. And I have to tell you, I know both husbands and wives, we talk about armoring up, where they have a special suit of armor, a psychological, emotional armor that they have to put on when they get home. Because they know my partner will willfully and or recklessly hurt me and really not care. They might care if there's consequences to them about doing it, but they really won't care about doing it. They don't care enough to do anything about it. And they have to armor up to be home. There's no oasis for them. One woman I talked to in particular, work is her oasis. Work is the place she can lay down her armor, lay down her sword, lay down her shield. Work is the place she has no enemies. Work is the place they're all friends, never foes. Work is the place where they're always partners, never opponents. Home is the place where the opponents are. Home is the place where the challenge is. Home is the place where she's going to get hurt. And so the job of the leader to give her rest is be able to let her walk in that door and go, I'm home. And take off that breastplate and expose her heart. Take off that helmet to expose her mind. Take down her shield because there'll be no flaming darts thrown at her. Drop the sword because there'll be no one she has to fight. And she can relax. And so the job of a husband, give her a place of rest. Now, does that mean there's nothing to do? Of course there's stuff to do. Stuff still has to get done. But it gets done in partnership, never opposition. I saw a recent stat that says at home, the division of home labor tends to be 17 hours for the man, 18 hours for the woman, and the division of paid work related is 1 hour in favor of the man. And I think it was an average of 37 hours to an average of 36 hours. And so what that means is, on the whole, it's all very egalitarian. So he works a little bit more than she works at a paid job, including the commute, and she does a little bit more around the house than he does. But it's very, very close. They both work about the same number of hours. They both participate about the same amount in the household and in the family. But what I constantly hear from women is that she's still on the mental burden and the emotional burden. That she's the one always thinking about things. She's always the one feeling her way through things, and she can't trust her husband to be handling stuff. That all she has to do is just go along, and it'll be fine. And that she'll be educated. She'll know what's going on. One particular case I recently ran into, the husband died, and the wife didn't even know where to find the bills and couldn't get into any of the accounts. She knew that there must be money somewhere. But not only did she not know the financial situation for her family, she didn't even know how to find it. She knew what bank they banked at, but she couldn't log into any accounts to go see anything. And so not only is she dealing with the sudden loss of her husband, she's trying to figure out, how are we going to pay the bills this month? She knows the money's there. She doesn't know where there is and how to get to it, because her husband handled the finances. But she didn't even know what they were. There wasn't the teaching, the training, the explaining part going on. There wasn't the place where he built in enough of his own expendability so that she could at least come alongside and take care of things. But that was the building in indispensability the wrong way, by locking someone out. And then she found, as she looked things up, that, they weren't in a good financial situation. That was just a story he was telling so he would feel better. That they had all kinds of debt, and he had been selling off her stuff. So that big safety net she thought she had wasn't there anymore. Imagine what that does to her trust. Not just for now her memory of the man, but now her ability to trust the subsequent man. So our job as leaders, whether we're talking husbands to wives, parents to children, employers to employees, senseis to students, make submission a gift to the submitted. Take the Jesus model. Give rest, teach, train, explain, be gentle, be humble. Make it easy, make it simple, burden lightly. And things might get hard sometimes. Like in 4P360 leadership, that last one is positive. Well, sometimes you have to be as positive as you can in a negative situation. Sometimes stuff is just going to be hard. It's going to be complicated. You want to make your leadership not be what makes it harder, and your leadership what makes it more complicated. It's already hard. It's already complicated. And so that in the end, even if they might not always like everything along the way and always be excited about it, that they will be glad that they were submitted to you. And that's the quality and caliber of leadership that you want to have. To love as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. To follow the model of Jesus Christ when he says, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Wrapping up with an exercise we often will do with the agape passage in 1 Corinthians 13. Put your name in here. Take Scott's yoke upon you and learn from Scott. for he is gentle and humble in heart. And you will find rest for your souls, for Scott's yoke is easy and Scott's burden is light. Could that be true for me? Or does any of that ring kind of backwards, off? Put your name in there and see if that prompts perhaps a need to make any adjustments. And make submission a gift to the submitted.